live.
Jenna says we're live. I guess we're live. It's good to see everybody. I hope that you're all doing well and staying safe during this pandemic and all the other things that are challenging and attacking us right now. This is the third in our series of, for lack of a better title, white people talking to white people about racism. Back in 2015, when Michael Brown was killed and the uproar began in Ferguson, and discussions heated up once again about a subject that really hasn't gone away for hundreds of years. I asked a few of my friends for advice on what they thought I could do to help. Being a preacher, being whatever. And what I was told over and over is if you would just talk to white people. And now there were a few other pieces of advice that were thrown my way, but one thing I did is see the logic of the need for white people, men and women, to talk to one another about racism. And so I started doing that back in 2015 to one degree or another. And then, of course, in the recent weeks that have turned into months, we decided to use this format. And today we're really lucky. We've got some folks that those of you that have been with us, especially those of you who are in our fellowship, you'll probably recognize some of these faces. Gordon Ferguson, Roger Lamb. You can tell I'm going in order of age here. What I guess it's not funny if I am, but anyway. There's Michael Burns, Alex Hunter, and of course Lisa is here. Jenna is our tech person, and we have a very, very special guest this time. In fact, one of the people who gave me that splendid advice 5 years ago, my dear friend, whom I may now call Dr. Michael Patterson. Mike, thanks for joining us, and we're going to be looking forward to hearing some comments from you later on. Oh, and there's
I'm popping in.
Thank you. I'm glad you're here because this really did start out. I think the first couple we did, I called it White Men Talking to White Men About Racism. And of course, men don't know anything if we don't get a female point of view on the subject as well. And so it's time to mix it up a little bit more. And having the Pattersons be here to give us some responses as we go along later, just thanks a lot for being here with us. But I wanted to start, if I could, with Roger. And recently, Roger, I know you made an apology, as the editor, leader, head guru, really just so much of the energy behind from the beginning to now of Disciples Today. You made an apology about racism public. It was very personal. I thought it was very heartfelt, but I was just wondering if we could start with you maybe bringing us up to date with what's on your heart. Why that? Why now?
Great question, Steve. It's so good to be with you. Thanks for inviting me. I can't look at you guys without thinking of 1976 when I first met you. And then you came and lived in our house for a while until we kicked you out to go get an apartment. And then you married Lisa.
That was after 2 days, by the way.
And then it wasn't. Then you brought Lisa up, and it's just been awesome. Many experiences in between. Thanks for the question. I started the ICOC Facebook page, I don't know, maybe 14 years ago, and have been an admin with several other people. We've got over 30,000 people on there now from over 100 countries. And it's just been a real joy to see everybody sharing baptisms and good news and things going on around the world together. But when the George Floyd incident happened, it just brought out unleashed an incredible outpouring of pain and hurt by disciples. And what really got my attention was it was not just in society, it was in the church that they felt this pain and they felt that they'd not been heard, not been listened to, not been valued for a long time. And it just kept coming in waves. And after 3 or 4 days, I cried because I was out of touch with the depth of the pain and the feelings. The So we allowed the conversation to happen and have allowed it to happen. We put guidelines on it, but we've tried to treat it as people grieving. You got to let them grieve and let them express their pain, and then also try to empathize and then point it back to Jesus. But the more I was listening, it was confusing to me because I was always so thrilled that we had built a multiracial church, because the churches I grew up in and you guys grew up in were definitely not that and had no intention of ever becoming that. And but those of us that started the movement, we were children of the 60s, had deep convictions about what the church ought to be. When I went to Crossroads the first time, it was the first time I saw a multiracial church that actually happened and actually people had relationships. And so when the movement started, from there and then Boston, it was very intentional that God wants this to be a church for all people. So that's how it was built. And we were sharing recently about, in the 80s, we studied the Bible with people. And every time we got to the sin study, we covered prejudice and racism and bias and stuff, and shared our own that we had to repent of, and then asked the person if they had any to repent of. And then also counting the cost, we asked them. And so during that time, I think it was really being addressed in a lot of ways when the church was just getting started and these thousands and thousands of baptisms were happening. And we always had an interest in, we have to have a multiracial presence up front, speaking on programs, all this kind of stuff. But I think in my case, I took my eye off the ball, and I got pretty happy that we had a multiracial church, and I just assumed it was going to continue to mature and continue to grow. And there are a lot of good signs that have happened. I mean, we've gone into 150 countries, and there are people had to go in and learn a whole culture and then build a church in that culture of all their cultures. And so there's been a lot of successes. But what I took my eye off of was that Michael Burns phrased it really well in his book. Being a multiracial church doesn't mean you're a multicultural church. And I think we didn't know what the implications of a multiracial church were in terms of the next phase and how to develop that more into the image of Christ. And then some of our leaders, what really hurt me a lot was having people tell me over and over that leaders had told them not to talk about it and shut them down and told them it was unspiritual. And it just blew my mind. And I was so mad, actually. And then realized, wow, we've got a lot deeper problems. Now, to their credit, the squad group has been trying to tell us this for a few years. And I've done everything I can to help them, but I don't think I really listened deeply like I needed to listen. And so I just became convicted that leadership has got to say something. We can't just, not respond. I'm getting notes from Taco Bell about their response to the George Floyd incident. Can't we respond? And so Gordon and I and Al Baird had a lot of discussions about what we could do to represent our generation. And then we finally decided just to do something personal. So I put up a personal apology on the ICOC Facebook page. And um, Gordon put up another one, then a lot more detailed than mine, and just really heartfelt and stuff. So that's how that all came about. It really was a conscience stricken. I had to repent and ask for forgiveness and try to be a part of the solution.
Thank you. I want to open this up quickly, but before we do, is there, as you've thought about this, and I know you've thought about this a lot, and we have known each other for a long time, and I know that there is a whole lot of love here, and we've got to watch each other do a lot of things. And so I know you as a very loving person, and we're all learning a lot of things about how. Well, we're learning some things that our grandma said years ago. Good intentions pave the road to hell. You know, we heard that saying a long. Now we're learning about intentionality isn't always a substitute for right action. So, is there any one thing in particular that you clearly think of where you did an about face? That something at your age now, is there anything in particular that you changed your mind that moved you in a way about, because you'd have said 50 years ago, I'm anti-racist. We'd have, of course, we'd have said that in our segregated churches too. But, yeah. But is there any one thing you can think about where you can say clearly, yeah, my mind has changed about this, and maybe some way that affected your apology?
There are several ways that I do think I totally underestimated how big of a problem this was and how much of a need it was. I I was too content and happy with where we were, and was not listening to the pain. And I said, I just need to go listen to a lot of people here to really get it and understand where this is coming from. And that probably changed my heart more than anything, was just deciding to listen.
Thanks. Well, when you become aware and you sincerely believe you've done something, when you've hurt somebody, you need to say, I'm sorry. And apologies are certainly necessary. Maybe we can go ahead and open it up, Gordon and Alex and Michael especially. Apologies have been made, are being made, but where do you feel like we are now, and what we in action steps we should be taking within our fellowship? What thoughts have you guys had? Anybody? Don't all speak at once.
I'll jump in. It's hard for me to answer that entirely because we're such a diverse fellowship in so many different places. And there's like 800 churches, and I don't even know the number. Roger would probably know in the North America, but I think in general terms, though, as I see it, there's three types of change. The first is symbolic change. And we see a lot of that in the culture, tearing down statues, changing the names of teams and stuff like that. Those are symbolic changes. And I think those can be important. They speak to where your mindset's at, what you'll allow and what's okay, and, where you're moving towards. And I think I see a lot of churches making symbolic changes, which are good. I saw a lot of churches celebrating Juneteenth and things like that. That's good, but those are symbolic. Then I think you have conversational changes. You know, what are you talking about? What are you teaching on? What are you learning? Those kind of things. And we see a lot of people in the society willing to do that. I see a lot of people in our churches willing to engage at that level. And I think those two are good, but I think they will eventually come up short if you don't go to the third level, which is structural change. And that's where you really start to make some deep changes. And you know, there's a lot of areas you could talk about with that. If we think about the kingdom of God and how we're going to address that in the church and society, I think of a passage like 1 Corinthians 12:21 to 26, where Paul is writing a church that he's challenging on. They've been divided by allowing the social divisions of the world into the church. And he looks and he says, you know what we need to do? We need to address that intentionally. And those who have been, and he uses that word weak, and he really doesn't mean like spiritually, he's not talking about their spirituality there. He's talking about their status level. And so those who are low status or marginalized or oppressed out in the world, it's the church's place to take special care to make sure that that's counteracted within the family of God. And that's the things that we're striving for and implementing and working towards and calling society to, I think, as well. If somebody is denied equality in their honor, then in the church, we got to take special care to make that equal. If they're denied education or economic or, you know, you name it, I think that's what he says. And he actually says those who are presentable in the world don't need special honor in the church. It's those who are marginalized and oppressed. So I think that's the next step for us, is to figure out what that looks like in all kinds of places.
Well, that was going to be my next question for you. Can you give us one or two ways in your imagination? What might it look like? Can you think of any specific example of what it might look like?
Sure. I mean, I think I think the big thing in 1 Corinthians 12 is that what the church had done, and I don't think they did it intentionally, is they mirrored the inequity of the world. They mirrored the situations in the world. And in James 2, he's laying out a situation. He says, suppose a rich man and a poor man come into your church, right? And again, there, James is really dealing with status, not so much economy. It's about status. But the idea there is the problems of the world will walk right into our church. They'll just come in because it comes in with each one of us. And so if our society, for instance, say for years has had inequities in education, well, what that's going to mean is down the road when you come to the church and you look around and you say, hey, who's ready to be a leader? Who's ready to take on some of those challenges and be a writer and have a large voice in the church? Well, there's going to be an inequity that mirrors the inequity of society. And so, you know, how do we address that? Are we looking at providing scholarships for young people of color, for women, for some of those things to equal some of this stuff out? You know, I don't know. So some of those sorts of things, which I think will address all kinds of things. If you know, if you live in a city that's deeply segregated, well, that's going to impact your church. If you go to geographic family groups, they're going to mirror in some respects the world. So how do we do that? Do we ask some folks to move into neighborhoods that we normally wouldn't? Do we, you know? And I think it takes creativity and it takes the Holy Spirit, but it takes intentionality and effort. And without that, we're just going to mirror in many ways the world's inequities.
Al, you want to add something to that?
Trying to figure out what the church is going to change. That's over my pay grade. You know, my sense is that you know, one of the things that we see all the time is that when leaders lead right and when they repent, the people will follow. And so I think we've got to have the courage to call people to repent. And we all know that godly sorrow brings repentance and leaves no regret. And the thing I love about what Roger shared, it's true with me. I mean, I felt like, although I think my apology is different, everyone's apology is going to be unique to them. I felt very, I felt my sin and my guilt was with my silence because the system really benefited me. And to me, we all know it's not enough just to feel sorry. And we're not suggesting that, by the way. But for me, it really got down to, what am I going to do? What does it mean for me? And in my community here in Johns Creek, Georgia, within my professional services company, does healthcare consulting, what are we going to do? What does it mean for me to act in solidarity? And, you know, we came up with a process to listen, to actually engage those, brothers and sisters of color, to learn, to ask curious questions, to not put guardrails on the response, but then to act. And again, I don't run the company. I'm not the CEO, but there are some things that I can that I can do. So we decided we were going to start recruiting actively from HBCUs. And I tried for years previously, and this has been a catalyst to start that. I know somebody in Atlanta who's a professor at an HBCU.
I wonder who that might be.
I do. And for years I said, look, I know that I'm sure we can get on campus, but they've assured me that we can do that. The other thing that we decided was we needed not only promote based on diversity as a screen, but also to hire based on. One of the things that we found was that within our company, the partners could look at the total diversity mixture of the firm, and we could feel good about ourselves. Once you started to kind of tease it out, though, the people at the associate director and below was where all the diversity was. Once you got to the director and the partner level, we were all old white dudes. And so, you know, we kind of had to sit back and say, okay, now we've got to take this to another level. We've got to actually look at how we're going to invest in promoting and training. And it was convincing. And so, but the biggest thing, Steve, for me was I had to change my own narrative of success for me. And I had to say, you know, it's not that I didn't run the race, but Steve, I had to say, you know, maybe I started on the 20-yard line, and maybe the people who were black or of color didn't, you know, started at the goal line or even in the end zone. And for me to accept that and to really own that was really hard, but it's true.
Well, I think you're getting to what we've been trying to talk about. I think we touched the hem of the garment, because I like all the stuff you're saying. I mean, I think you're a smart guy. I think we could get. Well, I'm gonna make it rather than. What do you guys think? I think we can get to where we sound an awful lot like we're trying to improve on affirmative action or something. Where what seems to me to be one of the initial problems in the church is getting a lot of people on board with the idea that there is a problem. It seems like we still have resistance from a lot of people. It seems like with people my complexion, this is a subject we like to talk about maybe for a little while, if at all, but then to change the subject. We've talked about that. Can we move on? We've done something. So I think I like your specifics. I think for us to say we want to look for people of color in any job in the church, the truth is, for a lot of us, we started doing that 40 years ago, but that didn't deal with the problem we still have now. We apparently, for all of our good intentions, there's still something we're missing, and I do think it begins with listening. But I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on why people want to? Do you agree that people want to change this subject very, very quickly? Is that part of the problem? And what are your thoughts about, if that is, what we can do about it? Gordon,
I think I'll be glad the next stage here. I want to hear from Mike Patterson or his wife. One, because we're white guys giving a white perspective about what we think is important. I think apologies are important. Roger called me about his convictions, and it hit me really quickly for an odd reason, actually. 2003 came to mind quickly because 2003, like most of our leaders at the time, I took a lot of heavy duty flack. I mean, really heavy duty. And I was thinking to myself, I mean, what's the deal? I'm the guy that speaks out about leadership problems. I'm the guy that co-authored a book, Golden Rule Leadership. I mean, why am I getting hit so hard? And then it finally got through to me. People were saying, you should have done a lot more, a lot sooner. And when this thing came up, when Roger mentioned it to me, I got tears in my eyes very quickly because I realized that in spite of all of my black friends and all of my associations, and Big Black Brothers Club in Boston, and one of them just called me out of the blue today, actually, before we got started. But in spite of all those friends and our spiritual talks about sin and righteousness and church and the lost and all of that, I had not waded in and said, hey, what's it like to be black in America and in our church? And that was my conviction. I could have done a lot more, a lot sooner. I started, 4 years ago with a blog, Black Tax and White Benefits. I've spoken on race in a number of different places. I mean, I've done a lot recently, as in the last 4 years, but that was because somebody asked me to do it, and then it took a life of its own, and I began to do it in a lot more concentrated way. So the apology part I needed, but I don't know. I mean, the feedback on Facebook to Roger and me both has been a lot of appreciation by people of color that we were honest and real and we hurt. The talking stuff is a given. We got to talk, and it's hard to keep older white people engaged. I tell a lot of my black friends that I have a lot more problems with white people than they do in some ways, and I get so frustrated that I can't get people to engage that really do need to get engaged. And I don't know what all the solution that is except to keep going after it. The thing, though, that I think Michael highlighted in his book and Roger mentioned is we've had cultural diversity. I mean, we've had racial diversity in the church, but we haven't had cultural diversity. I need to know, we need to know, what does that mean? That's why I'm excited about churches, and many of them are doing it, forming their own squad that hopefully will be mainly people of color. And I need for them to tell me what do we need in our church. Tell me what cultural diversity looks like in the worship service, in the music, in the preaching, whatever. What does it look like inside the building? And then what does it look like when we leave the building? And I know a lot of that's relationships that are real relationships, not just that birds of a feather stick together and most of my friends are one color or the other, the same as me. But are we really diverse in our relationships? I think that's a really big one. But I think we need help in understanding, okay, what are we missing here? What hurts you? What would help you? In the realm of cultural diversity, and I hope our squad groups can help us with that. But the Pattersons here might be able to help us, white people, get in touch with what really matters to them and to all the people they know and love and minister to that are their color.
Thank you. Well, Pattersons, I defer to Gordon. Thanks for being here. We ask you to be here to give us some feedback. You can jump in now. It's you've got the floor.
No, okay. Well, I
You and I are
appreciate
super
it.
close. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What?
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Alex.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Would you like to comment now?
You know, well, you know, Steve, you and I have had these conversations, I guess, the last 5 years plus. And honestly, I'm just exasperated. I I started noticing a deep divide in our fellowship back in 2006 when I relocated to the South. And I tried to have conversations with brothers about it, and it was almost like you're being divisive. And I think the thing that's most disheartening is when a brother says, "Hey, I feel a certain way about what you said of this situation," and it's just brushed off. It's like, no, that's not what I mean. It's like, unless I'm just crazy, there's a problem
Unless
here.
I'm crazy.
And I just got to a place. I said, okay, how am I going to spend my time? Am I going to spend my time fighting, trying to convince guys that we got to do better than the world, or just trust God and focus elsewhere? So I have spent the last, since those times in 2006, developing Angel, developing Jazz, trying to create an environment where my ministers of color can flourish and not have a glass ceiling over their head. And I think the person who has helped me out the most in terms of ministry here in the South has been Jim Linehan, because he's been gut level honest about where he has been, where he is at times. When we met to have a conversation that we recorded about race, uh, no, I had called Jim because the guys were really struggling. My younger guys, I said, Jim would be a good person to talk to. And he met us at the building and we were talking. And the thing that Jim did that was so intense, he said, listen, on my way here, I was struggling. This black person pulled in front of me. And I'm like, who do you think you are? He said, that's what's in my heart. So until we can be gut level honest about where we are as individuals,
All of us.
we can't make any progress. I was out at well, I guess that was a San Antonio. There was a leaders meeting to talk about race. And it was disheartening because everybody in the room had a black friend and nobody in the room had a problem. The one that came closest to talking reality was Randy Jordan, who said, I grew up with a black maid in my house. That's where I come from. But outside of that, everybody else was doing great. So that's just where I'm at. You know, Steve, you know, we just have these conversations, but you go ahead and say something.
Yeah, and I think where that's where the exasperation came in. I think that what has helped make some progress is the honesty.
Yeah.
It's just because otherwise you feel like you're crazy. Like you say, okay, those problems are in the world, they're not in the church, which is what we've said for years.
Mhm.
We have, because we have done an amazing job with converting autopsy people and being multiracial and amazing churches, right? But when we go to this area for some reason, over the years, it's been like, no, that's not us. We don't have that problem. And so it just felt like, are we crazy? Or we're feeling this, our people are feeling this, but we can't get our hands on it. And so like any other issue we have of disciples, whenever we are honest about it,
Mhm.
we say there's a problem, which is what's happening now, which is amazing, which means there can be growth. We challenge each other to look at each other, to look at that heart, we can grow. I mean, and Black people can handle it when you say, I was raised with people telling me, what Jim did. He came and he caught a lot of flack for it, honestly.
We're not from our people, though.
Right. He came and he just was honest about how he was raised, what he was raised thinking,
Mhm.
how that has affected him, how that has affected his leadership. And, everybody embraced that. We can almost say we can handle that. Like we get that. And what made him change.
Well, let me just share this too. And honestly, I've been talking to Angel. I said, how are our people reacting? You monitor their social media. Are they going off with all this stuff we see happening in America? He said, no, not really. Because about 3 years ago, when Jim came and said there is a problem, our people started processing.
There's a problem.
Right.
We're not crazy,
Mhm.
and we have to work towards this. And we have to make a specific effort
Yeah.
to love other people and call it out when we don't feel love. And this thing that happened when we went to visit that group, yeah, that wasn't right. And nobody's saying it was. Like just being honest about it. And so I think for me, I like to keep it real simple because it can get very complicated. I think the average Black person wants to know that there's a problem, we're honest, and we all have it. Like we've been told, I think I said in one of our meetings growing up, I've been told my whole life growing up, you can't trust white people. Like that was in me. They don't trust you, they don't look out for you, they don't. So I think when we come in the church, we can't expect that it all disappears and everything's awesome. And if we don't preach about that and talk about that and call us each other on it, the divide gets deeper and deeper and deeper. That just is what I think. And I think it's brave now what's happening with these kind of conversations. I think it's brave.
So one of the things, just to because I'm fortunate enough to be in Jim Linehan's congregation, and as we all know, repentance has a cost.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you that it has been it's been amazing to see the impact and the flack from other white people in our congregation that Jim and others of us have caught in leadership. I mean, and so guys, it's going to cost money because people are leaving and going to other churches. And I think I so appreciate what Patterson said, because it's the minute we go into this area and keep it real, people want all sorts of distractions. Well, it's about politics. Well, and it's not. It's not about that. And I'm just so thankful. Well, our church has benefited so much from the relationships that we've got with the Path and with Mike's church. And so to me, I don't know the path forward everywhere, but I know our church is more spiritual, and we're able to have conversation. Now we need to have a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But because of what you all, I mean, we had last year, we had Angel and his wife come and do our leaders retreat, the whole thing. They didn't give a speech. They did 2 days. And so for us, yeah, and now mind you, this is the Atlanta church where before the Pattersons came, the church was told that a Black person could never lead a white church in Atlanta. They're talking about keeping it real. So again, and apologies have been made, and I get all that, but the toothpaste is out of the tube, and so there just has to be repentance, and the only way forward is just by being gut level honest and saying, look, we're a mess, but we're gonna fix it together. And but I know in Atlanta, we need the Pattersons, we need the Path, and we believe our way is forward together. But again, we all know, might as well talk about it. There are churches in Atlanta in our fellowship that are a mile apart and that are predominantly white and predominantly Black. And of course, what I was told growing up, Mike, and you, I'm just going to, well, that's how the Black people want it. Well, no, that's not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, we were. Yes.
That's good to know.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, there is some truth to that, because when you have men who are passionate, who are dreamers, they don't want to be treated like children, don't want to be treated like glorified interns. And so honestly, I am much happier with what we do than going to church and being treated like I'm stupid. I'm 50 plus years old. I'm almost 57 years old. Yep. And I should not have to prove that I know ministry over and over again just because of my skin color. And, like I said, you're saying white people are starting to feel uncomfortable right now. Yeah. Welcome to the party.
Yeah, right.
Feeling it.
We have been feeling it. And we have to make a decision. This didn't just happen with George Floyd, right? Oh, long before, man. You have to make a decision. Right. Is this about Jesus, or is this about making people happy? Because even now, Sean and I have been abundantly fruitful throughout the years. We've converted all types of people. We don't hardly have any whites. They're gone. People have been recruited out of our ministry consistently. So how do I feel about that? Jesus is Lord. Just be a disciple where you are. But I don't appreciate it when people make snide remarks about the black church. They're all black. We I have converted all type of people, all as long as I've been a disciple. So, but do I feel insecure or insignificant? No. And that's what I'm teaching my guys. Listen, just do your job. That's all you can do. Do the best you can, and
Amen.
let the chips fall where they may. God knows, and God will see it.
Oh.
And I know, right, Lisa's going to say something before that. I know right now, another piece of advice I get is don't put it on your black friends to be teaching you about what you ought to already know or what you need to learn or what you need to research, or you know what I'm talking about. It, what's that, Sean?
No, you said you're be
One of the things I hear is don't go to your black friends asking them to do all the schooling for you right now to teach you everything. Read a book, research it. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that may be how some people feel. I personally feel like when you ask, Steve, one of the things you asked many, many years ago when we were in New York City, a long time ago, you said, I don't understand. I can't even remember what the topic. I was bringing you a topic about something going on in the church racially. And you said, I don't understand, but I trust you if you feel that way. So I don't think that I think part of the feeling that white people may feel is that there's a lot that we need to try to understand, and there's a lot we need to feel, and there's a lot we need to change, and there's a lot and I don't know that that's it. I just appreciated that you said, I don't get all of it, but I trust you.
The humility and the honesty.
The humility and the honesty. I don't know that I have to go study all these books and I have to get how you feel and where that came from and the disparate. The interest may be good, but I don't know that it's always that. I just need to know that you heard me, that you trust me, that it's not a shutdown, that's unspiritual, that's not happening here, kind of a thing. So that's why I say we keeping it simple. I think white people may feel like, okay, they're putting all of this on us, all the past on us, all the present on us, and what do I do with that? How can I hit? And it's discouraging. It's like anything I say is going to be wrong, anything I do is going to be wrong, when it's just kind of like, tell me what you think, tell me what you feel. Man, I never knew that. I never understood that. I'm on the total opposite. You know, I'm glad to know. And what can we change here? What do you see? What do you see the solutions are? How can we change? And that, because otherwise I think it's just overwhelming and impossible, to be honest. How is everybody going to do all of this? I could be wrong. I know Mike has come up with a racial reconciliation package that we're going to do with Portland. I think Michael Burns has something. I think we have a lot of books and solutions that we could study together as a church, and all that will be helpful. And but when it comes down to it,
it's relationships.
Yeah, just I want to say to you, hey, this whole thing has triggered in me that in New York, almost every week, I was being racially profiled. And here, and then when I came to Atlanta, I had 2 kids in my car, and some guy drives by my car, and I'm a woman, and I'm a lighter woman, and drives by my car and screams, "Get out of here, nigger," with my 2 kids in the car. And that came up when all this started happening. I was like, oh yeah, that happened. And oh yeah, that happened. Because what we do is it happens and you just keep going, right? And you're like, that's the way it is. And then something like this happens and it triggers all these feelings and emotions. But I don't expect you to fix it, if that makes sense.
Or you have people on the other end of the spectrum like me who have no expectation out of the world, who knows that people are lost. But when you come into the church and you're told it's different, but after a while you realize it's not.
In this area.
It's not. It's the same thing. And honestly, I've had more hurt in the church than I ever had in the world.
with the racial stuff.
with racial stuff. So
And that's because I think with Black men, something different is going on.
Yeah.
I think like Mike, somebody here in Atlanta told him, you know, that he couldn't talk to a white man in a certain way. And so I think with Black men, it's on a whole nother level. And, you know, I think that's going to be good to recognize and address, you know, as we go on as well.
Well, one of the things that grieves me is I hear from almost every person I talk to on this, every person of color that I talk to as we continue talking for some of us for years, but over the last couple of months, is the expectation of a backlash. That there even in the church, that there are brothers and sisters of color that feel like, well, be careful. You can talk about it only so much, but you watch, there's going to be a backlash. And it's going to get shut down. People don't really want to be honest. And I know there's a lot of white people. Really, there's some good white people. There's a lot of white people who are really confused, like you're talking about. And is it all on me to fix it? And I don't have sympathy for me or for anyone that ever assumes a position of leadership. You can't get tired about this. This is something you've got to get 2 Corinthians 7, indignant, eager to what did we say, Alex? You quoted the other day, you know, what readiness to see justice done. I have no sympathy for leaders that say enough's enough, we need to get to know. To me, this is a moment that will be a finer moment, or it'll be same old, same old. Mm-hmm. And it grieves me that there's an awful lot of people that are worried and expecting same old, same old. And that's something I just don't want to live with. But
well, I think that we do a lot of spiritual bypassing. And I think that what I've learned in the last while, over my years in the kingdom, it's like I thought that the church was diverse and all the stuff that was shared early on. I was there. I mean, we were part of it. We were part of an interracial church, the only interracial church in Chattanooga, Tennessee, when we left the South and went to Boston. So we were very much on that trajectory, very strongly. And I did think that in New York days that we had conquered a lot of it. But the day that the OJ verdict came down and we were standing in our office in Manhattan with about 100 leaders, 170 leaders that day. And as it came down, you could see the divide. It was unbelievable. As far as there were people that just felt differently about it, not that he was guilty or not guilty, but very different about what all had transpired. And I realized, oh my goodness, we have got to figure out something. And yet I feel like we didn't really figure it out, especially kingdom-wide. I think that the thing that really, going back a bit to 2006, when the Pattersons, I can hardly talk about it without crying, but when they moved to Atlanta and the way they were treated was like nothing I could remember. And I think that is, when you even bring that up, I just feel so much. I think that people really do not understand what happened there. I don't think they ever really got it, what happened there. And I don't think it was ever truly acknowledged or apologized for. And so I watched you be incredibly strong and spiritual. You were so careful not to divide people. You had all those young people, all those college students of every color, lots of kingdom kids, and you knew what the issues were. When you were told, the you were given and taken from you, the promises that were broken. And you were so careful, so wise to be so loving. You were heartbroken. And I watched it and I heard it. But I watched you be, those kids never knew what happened. They never really got it because there was no safety net for them. If you had revealed all that to them, you didn't know what would happen. It would damage their faith. There was no resolution coming. And I saw then the heroes that I knew that you were, of course, because you started the ministry basically in Harlem and took it to what, 1,000, and then started the ministry in the Bronx and took it to 2,000, 3,000. I don't know exactly, but you have done it. You have done what most people in the ICOC have never done. You have set the pace in ministry. Your skill is incredible. So, and the way your faith, your righteousness, your suffering. So, and I knew all of that, but to watch you be treated that way, really, I don't know, it was faith damaging. It was difficult. And of course, those were hard years anyway, and feeling very, powerless myself in some ways, which is not right, that not knowing exactly what to do or who to go to do something. But what I know is I have seen the damage, and I think that to think that we don't have a lot of problems is foolishness. It's just foolish. And I mean, even with leaders in the ICOC, I personally think we need to be listening to the brothers and sisters that have been in the ministry for 20 and 30 plus years and are Black or brown, and we need to hear them, what they have stuck through. They've sat through all of it. They have persevered in ways that we will never understand, and we need to be listening to them about what's wrong and how do we fix it. And I think that Mike Patterson has put together a program. Dr. Mike has put together a program and going to teach us in the Portland church. We're going to work his program. He's coming to do a workshop, and then we're going to work his, I don't know, it's a 6-part, I think, a series, and it may take months for us to work it and get through it to give us the tools to overcome. But I'm thankful that you're coming and you're willing to do that for us and with us, because I respect you and respect you guys so much and what you can teach us. So I didn't mean to.
So you like them is what you're saying.
I like them.
Okay.
I believe in them. I call the Pattersons the people that show up. When you're in trouble or you're in need, the Pattersons are the people that show up. So.
I know that we can talk as long as I'll be the last one to leave. Well, no, actually, I guess Jenna will be the last one to leave. But turn out the lights when you go. But I know there might be a few people that have to jump off because it's getting, what is it? It's almost 9 o'clock on the East Coast. I appreciate you staying up so late, Alex. I would like to try something here if we can. And Sean, you open the door for this. And Alex, since you might be, and I think Michael Burns has some place. I want you to stay as long as you can, but I don't want anyone to feel, this is, we're sitting together in the living room and leave when you got to leave. Stay as late as you want to stay, and Jenna will close up. But Sean, you opened the door to being willing to give advice or to answer questions. Alex, you and I have talked a lot of us have talked a lot. But Alex, can you think, because I know you to be a very pragmatic person. I appreciate you talking about what your pay grade is and what you pay, but I think one thing about that most of us have here in common is we love to talk. some of us more than others. But after a certain while, talking gets old, and we have to do something. I know some steps, Alex, you've taken. You've been open with some of them publicly. We're friends. I know a lot of the things you've done. John, can you give, when we're, and your husband was a big part of starting this. What I do, Mike? Well, I think white people need to talk to white people. You see the way we're talking to each other, and we're friends, and we can talk about most anything. But lots of the time, I feel like we're just almost saying something, that we're just almost right there. Do you have any ready advice for us, or anything, or Alex, or anybody? Do you have any questions that we can talk about?
I love what Alex shared about where you can start. Basically, is what can I do where I'm at? And if everybody just started with that, like, what can I do where I'm at? Is it, have that conversation with that person that just intimidates me. I really don't like them that much, or the way they say things. They're very different. Because that's actually how Jim and Mike started their whole relationship.
Yeah.
Jim had heard, this guy is angry. This guy is angry, and try to stay, and people are staying away from him. And Jim was like, let me talk to him and find out what he's angry about. And so I so appreciate it. Now it's a lifelong relationship. But I think some of these conversations are going to be with people that we wouldn't normally pick that person to have that conversation with. But I love that. And I think for me, it's been, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of, like, I don't feel backlash. We're already in the doghouse, basically. So
not with us, sister.
So the fear of backlash is long gone, but the fear of being that angry Black person, because when you say some of these things, you feel like somebody's going to say, you're just an angry Black person.
You become labeled.
Or you're just, you haven't forgiven, And so I'm like, I'm not giving into that fear. I'm going to check my heart, definitely, to make sure that I am forgiven and I'm not that angry Black person, but I'm just going to say what needs to be said. So it can be little things like that for each person. I'm going to reach out, to who it's difficult for me to reach out to, even though for us, it's kind of like converting them is hard. It's challenging because they get with us and then they move. As soon as they figure out this church over here is for me. That's just what we struggle with in Atlanta, the racial thing we struggle with in Atlanta. But so it almost feels like, why even try? Because they'll stay with us for a little bit and then they'll figure out that's really the church I should be in. Because that's, but not giving up personally. So I think, each person just doing what they can. What we said about white people talking to white people is not just that, but it's more, whatever your sphere of influence is, we're responsible to speak to our sphere of influence.
Yeah.
Wherever we're at. And I appreciate what you said, Alex. The chips, like, it is shaking some things up and making some people unhappy, but isn't that the pruning? It feels like that might be part of the pruning that God is doing with our churches. Amen. With the coronavirus and having to shelter in and all of it. It's just maybe a pruning.
Well said.
Sorry.
Roger's trying to say something.
That's awesome. Awesome stuff. I appreciate all of you and each of you. And I'm so glad that we're in Jesus together. That's the best thing.
Right.
I really do feel like God this year told the whole world to go to your room. And then he said, now think about race. And I think that's good. I think we need to do that. And I think it's revealing a lot of hearts, like Lisa said, like you said. I've read, answered, monitored thousands and thousands and thousands of posts and comments over the last 2 months. And I've got people on the extreme of both ends really mad at me. So I figure I'm in a good spot, but that it has surfaced some of the racism and supremacy in some of our people. It just has. And and that's good. Let's deal with it. This stuff is there. It's not like it's not there, and not talking about it does not make it go away. So you deal with it, and we have a history of the things that we have focused and dealt with. God has made incredible things happen with us. I mean, we didn't even use instrumental music when we started this whole thing. We were taught that depression was a sin, and taking medicine for it was wrong. And now we've got all these fantastic doctors and counselors, then the churches are helping back them and so on. We, the addiction ministry that New York started has helped so much, and purity ministry now, and now the grief ministry. And I look at it, frankly, as we're growing up. I think we went through our adolescence in 2003, and I think we're into our young adulthood now. But I see us as a movement, actually. We're just growing up, and we're starting to realize there's issues. We had no idea we're there. And maybe we should have been listening, yes. But I just pray that it's bigger than any issue. There's a structure and a conviction that any way that we're not like Jesus, and we're not God's image of the church, we're willing to deal with that, and we're willing to change. And we've preached forever, and still believe it. If I'm not doing something or saying something according to the Bible, show me, I will change. We will change as a church. And I think we're being called on that now. I think our preaching, we got to live up to what we preached, because we have not preached what it is about the social justice. We haven't had that as a part of our culture and vocabulary. And so when we see those things, we need to embrace them. I personally am very hopeful, because I think we have a great opportunity now to learn from what we did wrong in 2000 that would have avoided 2003. And I think we have an opportunity to handle that differently now. I firmly believe if our leadership had addressed the real issues, hurts, and pains of our members, and had listened to them, and had repented and apologized. Gordon was one of the first guys, Gordon and Wyndham, to jump in and do that. But I think if our leadership across the board had done that and listened and heard these pains and apologized, we would have been healed by 2003. And not totally, there'd be, but understand what I'm saying. There would not have been the crisis in 2003. I think we have an opportunity now to learn from that. And that's what you're supposed to do as you grow older, right? Learn from your mistakes of adolescence, now in our 20s or whatever. And let's address this. I'm one also that really likes specific ways to deal with issues. I'm very much into that, but that phrase, vision without execution is hallucination. I totally believe that. And people are asking now, well, what do we do? What do we do? I do think we have an element of leaders who don't want to address it because of their own prejudices they don't want to deal with. But I think that's a small group. I think most of our ministry people and leadership, they just don't know what to do. And they're open, they're listening now. When the squad said, hey, we're going to have a meeting tomorrow night to teach you how to do a squad, we had over 500-600 people show up on a Zoom overnight to do that. And now there's been successive things going on. What we're doing here, we're building a squad in our region. My son leads the region. I'm really proud of him because he hopped on this thing immediately and started, how do we build a squad? And we're having our, gone through it very carefully, but we're having our first meeting this week. And the Boston church, all the regions are building squads, and there's going to be a squad for the whole church as well. Well, that reminds me of how we did the addiction ministry or whatever. We've got a mechanism now to be able to deal with these issues. It's just like the Act 6. It's the leaders hearing the hurting Grecian widows and saying, okay, you guys go over here and now take care of that need, and empowering them to do that. So I'm very excited about this. I'm seeing these pop up all kinds of places. Obviously, it's only as good as the people that make them work, and et cetera, but it gives a mechanism to do it. Michael Burns's books, we've giving every squad member the All Things to All People book and the workbook. We're all going to work through that first together and say, we are the pilot case. We're going to listen to each other, and we're going to work through this as we'd like to help other people work through it. And so we're going to do the work ourselves and then try to roll it out to the rest of the region. But we have these incredible resources. It is just, we need to get action going here soon on them.
There's several things, obviously, we have to do at one time. We're talking about white people talking to older white people. Younger ones are doing a lot better, thankfully.
Yeah.
But there is, to me, a root system issue that Michael Burns brought up with me recently. He said a part of our problem in how people are reacting to the present circumstance goes back actually to our teaching of people before they're baptized, cost counting in particular. And he says what we do is we deal with Galatians 5 individual sins, but we haven't really taught and counted the cost with people about community sins or systemic sins. And I asked him to write an article that I'd love to put on my teaching website, and probably Roger would jump on it for Disciples Today again. But explain that concept a little, Michael, because we got to come at this thing from both ends, and that's the beginning end.
Sure. I think no, I appreciate that, and I think one of the things I'll kind of lead into before I answer that directly is, I think you're kind of crazy or blind if you look at the history of the country and say, you look in the 17th century, 18th century, 19th century, and you see intentionally built into the laws, built into the structure, was inequity and a superiority based on the power category of skin color, based on wealth, land giveaways, home ownership, prisons, voting, on down the line. There was a cultural dominance built in, and mindsets then to justify that. And so if we don't think that still has impact today, I think you're kind of crazy. I mean, there's just no way that it couldn't. And so that's a reality we have to deal with. And one of the things with dominant cultures is you don't have to be confronted with other cultures. And so you don't know that there's another way to approach life or, another perspective. And I think when all you've ever experienced is superiority, equality feels like oppression. And that's going to be a big obstacle moving forward. And so one of the big issues, and this is kind of what Gordon was talking about, is cultures that are rooted in Western Europeanism, which tends to be, what we would call white folks, are very individualistic in our worldview and our thinking and our culture. And cultures that emanate or are rooted in other places especially people of color in the United States, tend to come from cultures that are more communal or collectivistic in their thinking. And this really impacts everything. And so when we study the Bible with people, we tend to just focus on that collective worldview, which again is built into kind of the way we view the world. And so even for the individualist culture, even a topic like racism is individual only. That's all I've been taught to see. You're anti-structural in the sense of there can't be a system or a structure bigger than the individual, because I am autonomous. I am self-determining. And so racism then can only mean what I do. I don't like somebody for the color of their skin, and that's my sole definition of racism. And if you start talking about a system or a structure, I don't have a category for that. It's like telling me, it's like asking me what does blue smell like? I don't have a category for that in my brain. And so because I'm individual and I'm anti-structural, then with the individualist as well, the cardinal sin almost in an individual worldview is trying to make me responsible for something that a group did or that someone else did. I won't even listen to it. I won't hear it because it doesn't fit with my individual worldview. And then the solutions can only be individual for the individualist culture, right? Which means if you've ever heard, and I know this can really frustrate African Americans, people of color, is when somebody will say, well, I can't be racist because, and you can almost fill in the blank, because I have black friends. And that's super frustrating. But what individualists mean by that is, in my cultural dominant worldview, if the problem is individual, then the solution must be individual, and it's relational. So when individualists say that, they're really trying to say, I'm doing everything I possibly could. And it can become very frustrating then for somebody to say, well, no, there's other things. There's still racism. It's bigger than just you having relationships. And so it's really the need, I think, to shake people out of an individualist worldview. I think that's why so many people have become open to this topic, is because I think, the COVID, the coronavirus, punched the individual worldview in the face and made us really step up and go, man, maybe there is a bigger, we're all in this together sort of view. And a lot of people are waking up to that. Plus, I think we have to recognize that the biblical culture was collectivist. They were not primarily individualist. And so that was really the Greek worldview that later kind of took hold, and we've now shoehorned back into the church. But it's this collective worldview. And so what Gordon and I talked about was, I think, really the need to sit down and study with people, like, what role, and Roger said they used to do this. What role did prejudice and racism and societal structure and cultural dominance, what's that going to look like if you're joining a diverse church? Every level in Acts, when they started bringing in Jews from every nation under heaven, that demanded they give up some things. There was conflict in Acts 6 between the Hebraic and Hellenic Jews. They had to give up rights. They had to give up certain things. And then it goes to Acts 8. Well, now we got to accept Samaritans. We got to give up more rights. We got to give up more ideology, more of our dearly held culture and beliefs. And then the Gentiles come in Acts 10. Now we got to give up more rights. So the more diverse the church is going to be, the more rights you have to give up, the more ideologies and allegiances. And ultimately, the place you get to is where your only allegiance is Jesus Christ. It's not national. It's not political. It's not ideological. It's not cultural. It's Jesus alone. And so, but it's not just, I think, it's not just the racial. It's political. It's national. It's studying out those things. What is that going to look like? There's gender things. There's all kinds of things that I think are valuable to challenge. Because as I look at it, individual sin is an issue that we have to repent of. But I don't see it causing a lot of huge division in the church. But I do see racial, political, ideological issues with people who have smuggled in allegiances into the church and not dealt with them and not really wrestled with what full allegiance to Jesus looks like. that's something that we should be addressing.
Yeah. It's an allegiance issue. And
Mhm.
anything that's systemic, we talk about systemic racism, but Michael also mentioned sexism. That's systemic, as Lisa will tell you. You've got politicalism. That is a word now, and that's systemic. It's built in. We think politically and don't even realize it. And the one that I think is one of the most damaging of all is materialism, systemic materialism that's an American mindset. I owe it to myself. That one is so, I mean, I think a lot of what God is trying to do right now is not only make us look at race, but look at our whole money love. And so, anyway, I appreciate Michael helping me learn to think more than Western and individualistic as far as my responsibility and culpability.
And I think a lot of it also is generational. I think we're following the pattern. You look at DC, it's just old people fighting. These people have been fighting each other since the 60s. And it's the extreme left, the extreme right, just fighting, fighting, fighting. And I'm seeing, even watching protesters, it looks as though younger adults, younger white adults, are more open to a different reality, or even a possibility of a different reality.
Oh, yeah.
And and I just don't think it's a black or white thing as much as generational, because as amazing as John Lewis was, I was looking for his mentee. Who is his right hand person? I mean, so many of these guys, they're leaving now, and they carried the torch with them versus passing it on to another generation. I'd see that, and I've seen that a lot in the church, unfortunately, that young adults don't feel like this is a church for me. And I think we have to do a better job, even as we prepare people to take the gospel forward.
I think you're right. And I think that's one of the primary motivations for me is young people. Of course, these days you're young people to me, Mike. I mean, but then when we think about people, they're late teens, teenagers, people in their 20s, young. I don't want to put a cutoff on it, but especially the 20-somethings. When you see things, it always bugs me when things that are not even trying to pretend to be Christ-like appear morally superior to people who are supposed to be Christ-like.
Right.
I agree.
And there's a retooling that needs to be done. I think I mean, I can make it personal. In my heart, I need to retool. I can try to sound really smart and say what the church, what the kingdom needs. I think individuals like me, we were tooled for a very particular job. From the time I was young, I was trained, indoctrinated, whatever we want to call it. But I believed with all my heart the world was lost. And I believed with all my heart I had the way to save people. And I believed with all of my heart that I had been trained by the best people in the world to teach me how to do it. And then I went out into the world and we got to work and we started doing it. And I think that we need to retool now, because there's an aspect that seems to be glaringly missing in and let me, again, I'm trying to make this personal. In my Christianity, a thing that has eluded me, and I still haven't figured it out, but I think I'm getting some pictures in my head. I get thrown by what's political and what's principle, and intellectually, however I feel emotionally, I hate losing people. As a minister, as a friend, well, I just hate losing people. But intellectually, I know better than to try to do something because you'll keep people that way. Oh, to me, it is, at least intellectually, what's right. What are we supposed to be doing? And if we do what's right, then whatever happens, you got to live with it. But at least you're trying to do what's right. And for me right now, there have been inequities in the world that the church didn't, me bringing you into the church didn't help you escape that. And while I don't think Jesus doesn't promise us, a Cadillac and wealth and salvation. I mean, when we become a disciple for a very specific reason, well, let me say it this way. If you were my child and I'm a white man with a black child and something happens at school where you are mistreated because of your color, everybody knows I'm going to go raise hell about that. You are not going to treat my son this way, and I'm going to fight racism in that school. And I'm a preacher, and I'm a Christian, and nobody in my church is going to fault me. No one's going to say, Steve, you're teaching the wrong lesson. No one's going to say, just get back to preaching, preacher. If someone mistreats my child, I'm going to go into that school and turn tables over like Jesus would if I don't get what I want in respect to my son being treated the right way. Why shouldn't the church do that with racism in the world? Why shouldn't that be what white men like me have spent 40 years doing? At least 2. I've spent most of my life saying, come into the church where the world's going to hell, come into the church where it's great. And dear friends like you can say, well, it's been a little better for you, Steve, than it's been for a lot of other people. And to me, I'm trying to stop. It goes back to Jesus talking about in the world and not of the world. And what my role in the world needs to be. I think there is a Christ-like role for disciples to turn over tables, the same as we would if it was a child of ours. Why won't we do that if it's a brother or a sister of ours or a neighbor or someone that is getting mistreated over and over and over again? I don't know. This is me trying. This isn't me figuring it out. This is me trying to figure it out because it gets politicized so quickly, and we are, coming into. I think a time of the year, these next few months, I think will be hellish, are going to be very, very hard. But I want to be with the young people and anybody that is trying to be Christ-like in their indignation with how our brothers and sisters, and I don't mean just in the church, how our neighbors, our friends, how people are being treated that is unjust, that is unfair. And I've never thought like this in my life because I've divided those things. It's been we come out of the world and then we're over here and look how great it is. But one of the reasons why it's not as great in the kingdom as I want it to be or think it is because you're living in the kingdom having to deal with all this other junk, and maybe I won't even listen to you. Maybe after we talk about it 3 times, I'm like, bro, stop that. Let's change it because I can change the channel. I don't know.
Right.
Anyway,
right.
That's my tirade. I always get at least one tirade for the day. That's my tirade for the day.
And the response is, bro, that's the world. That's the world. You're in the kingdom. Be joyful. You're in the kingdom. That's what it's like in the world. It's like, okay.
That's more that spiritual bypassing, right? Where we just kind of say good things, like focus on God, and at least the church isn't that way. And I'm sure you, they didn't mean it that way, or heaven will be better. There's that rather than really listening and hearing and being willing to do something to make a difference.
Well, we've got some dear friends, dear brothers and sisters that are really wrestling with this and trying to figure this out. And we live in, a lot of people don't know about the Pacific Northwest, just how white it is. I mean, this is white with a white, well, it's got an older history that wasn't really white, but those folks got driven out for the most part. But there's a lot of good people that are really wrestling with this. And one told us recently, I think it's a really good way for me to understand what people are wrestling with is how there are some folks that maybe really bristle at hearing about white privilege or white fragility And maybe their reaction is what somebody would say, well, that's white fragility, the way you're reacting. But they are the kind of person that would be the Good Samaritan. That if they were in a situation where somebody was being mistreated or needed any color, they would be there. I believe that with all my heart, which is part of me trying to marry these ideas with there are people that need Good Samaritans right now, but maybe they need Good Samaritans going to step up and say enough. Enough with what we're seeing, enough with the mistreatment, enough with the inequitable treatment of people by the legal system, by the health system, by whatever it is. And this is really, and Roger, well, you guys, all of us old guys know, we just never thought this way, did we? You know what I mean? I mean, to try to think about how the church can take some sort of stand that would at least support or help fight social justice out there in the world. I'm looking for
I don't think we were very well trained or versed in that at all. I feel very much like those other parallels with the addiction and the other kinds of needs that we don't have the tools to deal with. That's why I'm so excited about what Michael Burns is doing. And his explanations are so biblical, but they're so clear and helpful. But we need to, we figured out after the church been around a while that our ministers really ought to study the Bible more. And so we sent them to school.
And
they got degrees.
Roger, thanks for being with us tonight. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree.
Well, it's changing
about an hour about it. I'm sorry.
It's changing the ideology because, like you and I spoke before, we were under the colorblind mindset. In the church, let's just be colorblind.
Yes.
Which was a noble attempt, but it left out people of color because you got to live in a world that is not colorblind. So I think we just have to, like said earlier, we got to shift the paradigm.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why
we have to understand that we grow as people, and we have phases in our life. I mean, I'm so grateful people don't hold me accountable for every way I was when I first met Steve. And I've had several serious phases in my life. I think the body of Christ is like that. I think we, in our movement, we're having phases of growth. And I think we're being very seriously challenged and need to learn that this is a serious phase we need to develop. One thing that this whole, what Michael talked about, the individual versus the group, I think, and you said, Steve, about our people are good people. They have good hearts. They would lay their lives down for people in a minute, and they serve all the time. But I think there's lack of training, lack of clarity and understanding about all this that we need to help them with, starting with our leaders and then going down. For example, I was just shocked at how Gordon and Wyndham and others, so many others, leaders in our churches stood up in 2003 and apologized for their own sins and mistakes, and then apologized for every leader's sins and mistakes, many of which they never committed. And with my old mainline background, I was, no, you can't do that. You've got to just, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's something really righteous about this, but it goes against all my fibers. And then of course you read Daniel, one of the heroes of the Bible, he did exactly the same thing. And many examples in the Bible. And of course, Jesus didn't sin at all and took on everybody's sins. So I think there's whole levels that we've got to go to. And I look at this as a great opportunity for us to go to a whole nother level of depth on really being disciples and on our really being the body of Christ. But we got to help each other get there.
One last thing I'll say is a concern for me, and that is when you start seriously focusing on serious matters, that can become your whole world. And I think we've got to, be careful about that one. In 55 years of marriage, my wife has a few flaws, not nearly as many as her husband. But if I focus only on those flaws, then after a while, that's kind of all I see. And I think we're going to have to help people as we go along, seriously focusing on serious things, to also remember we got a lot of stuff that's really good. And I don't want to lose my gratitude in the midst of my pain. I don't want to lose my gratitude in the midst of my frustration that things don't change as quickly as I think they ought to change. I don't want to lose my gratitude for the things that are good. And I think that's.
And you're one of those things, Gordon. You're one of the good things I appreciate.
Yep.
And I would say something else. The brothers and sisters of color, and for this comment, I would say especially the ones that have been around for decades and have stayed faithful in spite of all of this. That fellowship is so wonderful, and can't hear us. They can't hear us say we got a lot of things to appreciate. Like, I don't want people to hear that and say, okay, it's time for the conversation to be over.
Right.
I know you agree with that.
Right.
And that's why one of the trickiest things, and we don't have time to get into this tonight, is I know that we've had a lot of brothers and sisters of color who have been leaned on and pressed on and been put in the position that we need you to get up and say, peace, peace. We need you to get up and help get people just to focus back on Jesus. And I've watched what happens to a lot of good people when they believe that God wants them to do a certain thing, even if it isn't what God really wants. Obviously there's a big discussion. We don't all agree on mutuality, on gift-based leadership versus gender-based leadership. Not trying to start an argument here at the end. I know Gordon's on the same page with me, and Roger and I haven't had a chance to talk about it. But I know that if the idea of gift-based leadership is correct, if suppositionally, I would say, there's a lot of women that will be a problem for, because we've been taught our whole life that something is the right way to do it, and this is how you please God, even if it's really distasteful. And I'm bringing that up to say, in this circumstance, there's a lot of brothers and sisters of color who have been put in a position for decades to help us get people's eyes back on baptizing, whatever we're supposed to do. And I beg anyone that is listening, I beg people, don't feel like you have to do that. Don't feel like God's not going to be happy with you. We've got something here that we have to figure out collectively, like Michael pointed out, but also individually. We've got some stuff that some people might not make it to heaven if they don't figure it out. We have a lot of discussions that aren't salvation issues. This just might be one for some people. And I certainly don't want my brothers and sisters of color who have been as tooled and trained and ingrained in them. Well, unity is the most important thing. And God knows I believe in unity. The same way a lot of women would say, Lisa, be quiet, don't be teaching it. This isn't what we've done for years and years and years. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but I don't want anyone out of fear. We all want to please God. We all want to find the truth. And this is a subject that I would bet my firstborn child's life, and I love her still. This is a subject we obviously haven't figured out, because right there is Michael Patterson, a brother I know who is is as trustworthy as any man on the planet Earth. And he's saying, Steve, you didn't live my experience. You don't know my experience. I'm still faithful. I'm still here. But this is, life in the kingdom has been different for you than it's been for me. And I don't want the people who are best qualified to help lead us through this to feel like they're in a position to try to calm things. And I'm calm, but that's the wrong word. What am I trying to say? To shorten the conversation, to end the to get to the status quo. We've been in some status quo in our fellowship for almost 50 years. And of course, we know the world's been in it even longer than that. So.
Well, can I just say this?
Yes.
I agree with Gordon on this point. Can we get back to the biblical Jesus and not the American Jesus? Yeah. If you teach the biblical Jesus, that will fix a lot of stuff. Because the more we're getting ready to do an extensive look at Matthew, the more I look at Jesus, number one, being an outsider and all the people he reached out to, and then look at what we do as church, I think we just have become so Americanized. So what we got back? The purpose should be Jesus. Right. Let's get everybody focused on what would Jesus do. And I think that will encompass a lot of what we're talking about.
In this conversation, can you give us one I know you're thinking of something specifically. Can you give us one specific thing Jesus would do in this conversation?
Oh, well, he purposely went after people, like my wife said, that nobody else wanted to talk to. I mean, that's what he did. And it's so cool. Matthew, the tax collector, nobody wanted to talk to that guy. Nobody wanted to talk to Zacchaeus, the woman at the well, the Canaanite woman. So I think just imitating the basics of, let me build a relationship. Because I do believe there are systemic issues, but also relational. So much of my experience with you, even when I wanted to write people off, I'm like, well, I can't say it was like that with Steve and Lisa. So I can't write off everybody. So I do think relationships do play a huge role in what we're trying to accomplish. Oh, and by the way, I got to run, but Angel Maldonado said he would like an invitation.
Good. No, I will give that some serious consideration.
Love you guys. Thank you for the invitation.
Roger, Mike, everybody, thank you so much. Love you guys. I will cut you free. I hope this has been. Hope it's been good for you. Hope for whoever is watching that this has been helpful, and that one way or the other, it's going to help us stay in the love of our Lord Jesus as we wait patiently on his coming. So God bless you guys. Thanks a lot. Jenna, why don't you take us off of live, and everyone can get back to doing whatever it is you were doing.